Good morning. I'm Jane, and I'm glad to be back after our summer break, bringing you some good news for this almost fall day. It's raining hard as I'm recording this on Monday, but I'm enjoying this weather, actually. I'm looking forward to making chili tonight for the first time after all these weeks of trying to plan cooler meals. Well, today's reading from the Gospel of John, chapter 12, is the story of Jesus riding into Jerusalem as excited crowds welcome him with shouts of Hosanna. It's the familiar story we hear on Palm Sunday, and I'll just read verses 12 to 15. The next day, the great crowd that had come to the festival heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem. So they took branches of palm trees and went out to meet him, shouting, "Hosanna! Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord, the King of Israel." Jesus found a young donkey and sat on it, as it is written, "Do not be afraid, daughter of Zion. Look, your king is coming, sitting on a donkey's colt." My Bible gives this passage the title, Jesus' Triumphal Entry into Jerusalem. But I wonder if Jesus thought of these events in that way. He didn't come at the head of an army. He wasn't clothed in royal purple. And at least some of the crowd shouting Hosanna would be shouting, "Crucify him," before the week was out. Jesus knew that his resurrection triumph would not come until he had passed through suffering and death. The words from the Hebrew scriptures that John quoted in this passage are from the prophet Zechariah, and he said it this way, "Rejoice greatly, O daughter Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter Jerusalem. Lo, your king comes to you. Triumphant and victorious is he, humble and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey." Zechariah points out a contrast. On the one hand, the king is triumphant and victorious, but on the other, he's humble and riding on a donkey. Jesus didn't enter Jerusalem like a king mounted on an imposing stallion. Instead, I think his sandaled feet were probably just inches from the ground as he sat on that young donkey. The choice of such a humble mode of transport fits with what we know about Jesus, though, doesn't it? He lived simply with ordinary people. He knelt to wash his disciples' feet, and he never seemed to want to court praise and glory for himself. Well, the good news that speaks to me today in this story is about the virtue of humility. As followers of Jesus, we are called to be humble too. In fact, if you think about it, humility is really the only reasonable attitude about ourselves when we consider ourselves in comparison with the greatness of our God. But I think at the same time, there's something very comforting and comfortable, if you like, about the right kind of humility. It's nothing to do with low self-esteem. It's about knowing who we truly are and whose we are, and being content to be useful, like that donkey, with whatever skills and capabilities God has given us. I'd like to read you a poem by Mary Oliver that's very appropriately titled, "The Poet Thinks About the Donkey." On the outskirts of Jerusalem, the donkey waited. Not especially brave or filled with understanding, he stood and waited. How horses turned out into the meadow leap with delight. How doves, released from their cages, clatter away, splashed with sunlight. But the donkey, tied to a tree as usual, waited. Then he let himself be led away. Then he let the stranger mount. Never had he seen such crowds, and I wonder if he had all imagined what was to happen. Still, he was what he had always been, small, dark, obedient. I hope finally he felt brave. I hope finally he loved the man who rode so lightly upon him, as he lifted one dusty hoof and stepped as he had to forward. As I read that, I'm picturing Jesus lovingly patting the donkey as they ride into the city together. And that image of God's love and the donkey's humble obedience seem like a good place to stop for today. So I hope you've had a great summer and that you're doing well as we head into the fall and the resumption of an almost normal life back at St. George's. So check your email tomorrow for a link to the continuing good news from Jordan, and I'll talk to you again in a few weeks. Bye for now.